This week's reading focuses on the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue from a park in Memphis, Tennessee in 2017 and around the groups that were against it and how they did that. So, a little bit of history on who this guy was. He was a Memphis planter, slave trader, and alderman who was famous for being a general during the Civil War. He was also credited with founding the KKK, also known as the Ku Klux Klan. So for many years, officials were in favor of removing the statue, but no progress was actually ever made, especially because of the Tennessee Heritage Act, which by definition prohibits the removal, relocation, or renaming of a memorial that is or is located on public property. And so there's a group with the hashtag #TakeHimDown901, which were Memphis activists, and they were a black-led coalition founded by a person named Sawyer. And around June, they were calling to remove the statue. They used a variety of rhetorical means like rallies, marches, social media, radio and TV, newspapers, and whatever other resources they could use to get their message across the board. Eventually, the city sold the park to a local nonprofit, which then removed the statue. So really what this reading tried to focus on was the how this group and the why of this group, per se, and the intentions of their actions and what they really wanted to see done, which I'll go into now. So a term I saw that was interesting was something called the counterpublic. It was a little bit interesting to try and get a grasp on what it meant, but it is described as the rhetorical elements of a poetic world-making that go into forming the collective subject of such resistance. So this group used this, and it grounded itself in a racially and regionally specific sense of history. They wanted to focus on the importance that white supremacy had in restricting who could claim to speak up about the South historically, and how Southerners used back then and still use now legal and extra-legal means to seek that same control they had back then. And so they really just wanted to reinterpret the heritage of the South. And the group was able to succeed in making their purpose relevant to anyone, of course. Another little bit of history, too, that was brought up is in 1956, a Memphis mayor had the proposal to appoint an African American to the board of the local public hospital, and he described it as giving them a sense of belonging. There was a lot of resistance to that, though, as many white people did not want an African American to have that sense of belonging, and this is symbolic of the struggle that African Americans had back then, and they still do today. So this statue, the one that I brought up initially, was a constant reminder of the constraints that people like him and so many others had on freedom in the South. Depictions of the statue as a rhetorical object in the service of white aggression allowed for accounts of his history of violence to attach themselves to the present struggles. The group faced a lot of harassment and racism for what they were trying to do, and it was a lot of based on their race, of course, their weight, their character, and they named people like state lawmakers, city leaders, and police as complicit in stopping their efforts to remove this statue. Something that was also brought up was that in the article, white and black people in the area now would both identify as Southerners, but back then that would not be the case, which back then was about 2 decades ago. But they are not really proud to be Southerners, but instead they now believe their region to be hospitable compared to back then, of course. And the targeted audience of this support group was black people and anyone who supports equality for black people, which committed to their stance of equality while also widening their support audience. And she also described a Southerner as everyone who has lived and experienced the South, her being Sawyer, the person who created this group. And so, when the statue was first unveiled in May 17, 1905, around 25,000 people gathered to see this. And these people see him as a hero, and that's the challenge they really had, was to change this perception of who Forrest was. But of course, they wanted to associate white supremacy as a form of violence and terror, while also giving that spotlight to black people in Southern history. And they wanted to create a future in not only Memphis, but in the South, that was more expansive and open to other people, of course. They were also able to use a rhetoric to supplant white-centered constructions of Southern identity and the interest, the host of goals beyond just one statue. They didn't just want to remove one statue. Their goal is to eventually get rid of a lot of other things, to really tackle the racism that exists in American history, not just the South. So I think this article did a good job on explaining how you have to frame your issues to truly accomplish something. And that is exactly what this activist group did. And of course, they were able to accomplish their initial goal, but that's just the start of what they want to do. I think it's important that we understand why they want to do these things while also knowing the process of how they're doing it. Thank you and have a good day.